Hey there folks, this is Mike from Techaholica, and today I'm bringing you my fourth lesson on my Twitch bot tutorial. And today we're going to be looking at a user command called bet, which is going to allow the user to either set their bet or show their current betting amount. And also we're going to work on an alias called useMoney, which is going to allow the user to use money on the games. And in that alias we're going to talk about the isNum command, round, and increment and decrement. So let's get started. Alright, so here's what we had last time. Also, I want to apologize because in the last video I talked about starting the timer, but I mentioned turning the timer off, but I didn't show you how it looks in here, right? So last time we did the start on join, start user timer. Well, now we're going to turn that timer off because when the user joins the channel, we're starting a timer so that they can earn money after, by default we're setting it to every 10 minutes get $10. Well, when they leave the channel, which is going to trigger this part event right here, we want to turn that timer off so that they don't earn money while they're not in the channel, right? So basically what you're doing is we're saying when we started the timer, we started it with the timer plus the username. So the timer would look like this, timer, Techaholica. So Techaholica was the one who started, who joined the channel. It would look like that, right? So now we want to turn it off. We just say timer Techaholica off. So that's what we're doing here. We're saying the timer plus the username of the person who just logged off, and turn off that timer. So I apologize for leaving that out of the last video. I thought I'd add it in real fast right here. Alright, so now let's scroll down to where we have our bet command, right? So I've already copied and pasted it in here. And basically what we're doing is we're going to be looking at, we want to have the user be able to specify a bet, right? So over here, they can say bet. And if they're doing just exclamation bet, that's going to return the current betting amount, which is I think 10 by default for most people. And if you do bet 100, now you're betting $100 on every game you're playing, right? So that gives the user a chance to vary their bet a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check and see if the second argument is there, right? So if the second argument is not null, and this is and right here. So when you have this, you're doing and. So both these values, these expressions must be true in order to get into the true statement here. If either one of these is false, it jumps down to the other one, right? So is the second value, so when I do bet 100, what it's doing is saying this is the $2, right? So it's saying if that value is not null and it is a number, so is 100 a number? Yes, let's go into this section here, which is going to be this part here, right? Alright, so next thing we're going to do is say, okay, well now it's a number, we know there's a value there. Is that value greater than 0? Just to do a check so they can't do something like, negative. Can't bet negative 10 on your games, right? That doesn't make no sense. So a little bit of error checking, making sure that value is above 0, sorry. And if it is, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna round that bet to 2 decimal places, right? So if I did something like, 10.555555, what this round does is it basically takes the argument, which is in our case 10, not negative, but just 10, right? And it says, okay, I want to round it to 2 decimal places. So it's going to round it to this, which is more, that's like a usual dollar amount, right? So we want to do that first, just to, also it's kind of error checking it as well. And it's going to take that value and store it in this variable called bet. Now remember, we talked about the $sign here. Now message is a command and round is a command, but since message is at the beginning of the line, you don't need to use that $sign here. But here, since we're doing a command inside, in the middle of the line, we need to put this $sign in order to call this command so that IRC knows we're calling a command here, right? So we're going to round it, store that value in this bet, and we talked about this last video, how you write to the ini file. So the user has an ini file which is going to store their stats, right? So it's going to have their cash amount and also how much they're betting. And so what we're going to do is just say, okay, pick up this user file, write to the character section, to the bet property, and change this bet property to bet. Now this user file we haven't created here in this section yet, so we've done it in the other aliases, right? So it's basically just the exact same thing. So I'm going to make sure we include this part here. Alright, so we've already done this before. We're going to say, okay, this is the string concatenation, so we're going to say take the base stir, take the users, add the username, and add on the INI, and that is the user file of where we're storing that user, which is going to be, let's see, if we do data MRC, so baster users username.ini is where the file will be stored at. And if we open this up in Notepad, you see, well, right now we only have the cache command, the cache property in there, but once we set the bet, you're gonna have something like, so if I did bet 100, you're gonna see this in this INI file now, right? So this is the section, this is the property, this is the value for it. So that's basically what we're doing right here. We're saying, okay, if they specify a value, we're gonna update that value there. Okay, so let's get back down to our bet command. So we're gonna write the bet command to the INI file, and then we're gonna let them know that, okay, we changed your bet for you. That way later on we play other games, the games need to know how much the user's betting. It's gonna look to the INI file, see how much they're betting for the game, and deduct that amount from their cache. Here we go, saying, this is just error checking that if they didn't give us a greater than 0 value for betting, just give them a message saying, sorry, you must have at least $1 to bet. And then this section here is if there wasn't, so if either one of these was false, it would come down here. So if they didn't give us a number, or if they didn't give us a value at all, so if they did something like, I want to bet money, it's going to say, oh, whatever, we're just going to come down here, and all we're doing here is going to output how much you're currently betting for each game. So it's going to read that bet value, which is, you know, we set it up here, but now we're reading it down here. Read the user file. Once again, N is just for security reasons. You always want to put N there. Read the character section and the bet property and store that in the bet variable. Check and see if the bet is not null. And then if it's not null, I mean there is a value there, then say you're currently betting that value which we just read. And then if it is null, that means they haven't set a bet value yet. So just let the user know you haven't set a current bet amount. Use this, right? So we're just letting the user know that you don't have a bet amount, so you want to set your own bet. Another thing we can do is, you know, how we have these, we talked about in one of the previous videos, how we have a configuration file. We can have something here for like a default bet amount, and we can read that in so that no matter what, when a user first enters the channel, they're always going to have the default bet to 10 or 100 or 1 or whatever you want to, right? But in this case, we're forcing the user to specify their bet command for them, for themselves, right? So here we go. That's all. So that's basically all I said. There wasn't too much new here. There is the isNum, which is really handy to check and see if a variable is a number, and then the round, which is also a really useful one for in this case because we're dealing with money, so we only have 2 decimal places. So we're rounding whatever value they gave us to the second decimal place. All right. So now we're gonna move on to the useMoney, and that's gonna be in this play slots, right? So now we're actually giving the user the chance to play the slots. So let's come down here. All right, so now we're doing is play slots. So now when they type in play slots, they're actually going to start playing the slots. But before you can play the slots, you need to make sure that the user has enough money in order to afford, right? So if they have $50 cash, but they're betting 100, they should give an error saying you don't have enough money to bet. So that's what we're going to try to do here, right? So before we play the slots, make sure they have the money. So the first thing we're going to do is, once again, we're going to read in the current bet value that the user is betting. And then we're going to run this alias, useMoney. So let me get that over here real fast. Or I'll just paste it down to the very bottom here. Alright, useMoney. And before we go to that one, I want to go back up here real fast to what we're just looking at. So once again, you know, in the past we've used aliases. You didn't need to use this $sign, but once again, it is in the middle of the statement, so you must use that $sign. Also, it's returning the value, so we're going to store that value that's returning into this paid variable, which is what we're going to do is return a true or false, like can they afford it? True, they can't afford it, false. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say useMoney and pass in the bet parameter, which we just got from the user file. Also, look how we're doing. Now we're using parentheses to enclose the bet. So that's how you pass the variables to an alias, is through this command here, and with the parentheses there. You see in other cases, if it's at the beginning of the file, you don't need to do that, but now it's in the middle, so you need to use the parentheses whenever the command is in the middle of the statement. It's not at the beginning. All right. So just a little bit of syntax there. That's also why MRC is kind of confusing the script, and you have these different properties and how things are a little bit different. If you've coded in other languages before, that's kind of a weird concept that you can write out the statement two different ways, right? So if you start off a line with the command, it's written one way, but if the command is in the middle of the line somewhere anywhere after the first word, then you must write it a different way, right? So that's why it looks different there. So now we're in our useMoney. First thing we'll do is a little bit of error checking, is say, okay, is the value that they passed us null, right? So they must provide us a dollar amount for how much they want to use. So we should never get here because we're controlling the useMoney alias. And the users aren't calling useMoney, we are. So, but I just put a little error checking saying, you know, they didn't specify an amount, and then return false. So this return is what's going to get sent back to that other variable, right? So when we're up here with this paid, if for some reason we didn't put a value in there, it'll return false, and then paid will now equal false. And when you get to here, it's going to say if paid, it's going to say false, and then it'll skip it. You're not going to be able to play the game, right? So that's just a little bit error checking. So once we get past that error checking, we're going to look into the second part, saying, okay, they did give us a value. We're going to store the value they gave us into this variable called price. Now we're going to check once again, is price a number? It should be a number, so we're going to go into this section here. If it's not a number, then you can get, once again, you have an error saying this is not a number that you're betting. Okay, so we should be in this section here because you should be passing a number in this section here. We're going to, once again, store the user file. Look up the user file. It's going to be that base stir users username.ini. So get that because we need to read the cash amount of how much money they currently have. So once we have their cash amount and we know how much they're betting, we've got to see if the cash amount is less than the price, then we return false because they have less cash than the amount they're betting. If it's true, it means they have more cash than they're betting. So now we're going to do is this command here, which is DEC, which is basically decrement. What it's going to say is take this cash, the number that's in this variable cash, and decrement it by subtract basically this amount here, right? So if we had $200 in cash and our bet was 100, it's going to say take $200 and decrease that by 100 and store that back into cash. Now I mentioned the increment command because the increment works the exact same way. If I do this, this is the opposite. So now what I'm saying is if I had $200 here in this variable and price was 100, what you would do is it would take $200, it would add on 100 and store that back into cash. If you do without without the second parameter here, it just does the ones, right? So either increments or decrements by 1. Really useful commands to use those. So in this case, we want to decrease the value of cash by the price amount and then write that new cash value into the inventory, right? So if you had 200, you decrease it by 100, your cash is now 100. We write that 100 back into the user file so that now we've basically made the transaction. We subtracted the price from their cash, and now they only have $100 left, right? And then we say true because yes, the transaction went through successfully. They're able to afford the game. We already took the money out, so it's returned true. And I guess in this case we probably need to return a false here. I left that out, so it's return false because we got here and it was not a transaction that went through, so return false there. And true and false, you can see, are kind of like their own commands with the $sign in front of them. So that's how you return Boolean value. Boolean is basically true or false, so that's how you return true or false with those guys. So we can see here that, let's go back up to our guy here. So we're going to get the current value that they're betting. We're going to pass that in. Get the current value they're betting. Pass that in to this alias here we're using called useMoney. That's going to check and see if they have enough money to bet the game. If so, return true, in which case we're going to play slots. And right now, play slots is nothing more than just a stub holder because I want to spend the entire episode explaining how the slot machine works next time. So really, it's just let's just add this. We'll just add a little stub, just so we could add on to it later. So let's add the play slots. All right, play slots there. And right now it does nothing more than just say playing slots, right? And I guess one last thing I want to add on, which I didn't mention in the original slide, but there is this cash, another user command I want to add on. It's real simple. Basically what I want to do is just say, oops, cash. This way it gives the user a chance to say how much do I currently have, so they know they get, you know, can I afford it, can't not afford it. And what it's going to do is when the user enters cash, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the current value of cash in their INI file and just return that back to them, saying, you know, write to the channel, message Shan, this username, you know, Techaholika or whoever has this cash dollars. So that's a real simple one, and that's all there is to it. So let's load this up and see how this works. So all right, so let's try the bet command down here. Oh, actually I need to do it on this side. So that's one thing I probably should mention earlier on, is that your bots can't run commands, right? You need to run them outside the bot. You can't run commands in here because the bot kind of ignores its own commands. It doesn't read its own commands. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do it on the side screen over here. I'm going to enter a command, and we're going to check these commands that we just did just to verify that they work, right? So I'm logging in on my second monitor here. Let's do bet. You should see down here. Alright, let's close this down here. So you say I entered bet, and I don't currently have a bet amount, so let's do bet 100 and refresh, saying you're now betting 100 for all gambling games. Now if I still had here, we could, so let's look at my user profile here, and we should see that, yep, there we go. So we should see that it wrote the bet command to our INI file just like we want to. Okay, now what we want to do is see how much cash we have. Do cash, you can say I have $1,000, so I'm betting 100, I have $1,000. Now if I do play slots, it should deduct that. It's, okay, so it says I had enough money, therefore I did the playing slots, so now I am playing slots. And I do cash now, it should, oops, wrong way, sorry. I do cash. Now you can see that I had $1,000, I played slots for $100, and now I have $900. So everything's working good. So anyways, this is a really kind of a quick video, but I didn't want to do the whole slot machine mechanics in this video too. I wanted to have that be its own video. So in this video I just did a little bit of cleanup, showed you some new commands, and now we're all set to do the actual slot machine, which we're going to do in the next video. So stay tuned.